Tom Hardy, Empath, Narcissist, or Something Else, Part 2. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. We're now going to examine the childhood of Tom Hardy to ascertain what this tells us, to assist us in the process of determining what he is. Those formative years are hugely important, possibly resulting in an individual being set on the path to becoming a narcissist, as a consequence of the genetic predisposition being provided by a parent or someone further back in the lineage and being exposed to a lack of control environment. Alternatively, it might be that they're exposed to a lack of control environment, but there are interveners, or there's no genetic predisposition, which can result in a different outcome altogether. Examining the childhood of our subject is particularly meaningful because it provides us with understanding what has forged them, what has created them. Tom Hardy's childhood was characterized by rebellion and self-described unruliness. He's openly reflected on his youth, describing himself as an obnoxious, troublemaking lunatic who was not comfortable in his own skin. Might this self-reflection be indicative of the fact that he has the ability to examine his behaviours and realise that they're poor? Or is this pseudo-self-examination which is purely being pumped out as a consequence of manipulating those that he's talking to and being interviewed by? Hardy's teenage years were marked by several instances of misconduct and minor criminal activity. For instance, he was expelled from Reed School, a public boarding school in Surrey, for stealing. This would show an absence of emotional empathy for those that he was stealing from, a lack of accountability for his behaviour, a lack of boundary recognition, and a sense of entitlement. The fact that he broke school rules and engaged in dishonest acts to the extent that he was expelled demonstrates serious misconduct on his part. At aged around 15, Hardy was arrested for joyriding in a stolen Mercedes while in possession of a gun. The charges were dropped reportedly because his accomplice was the son of a diplomat, allowing the incident to be resolved discreetly. In effect, he had a get-out-of-jail card. This underscores teenage delinquency on his part, and he was fortunate to escape a criminal record. Hardy has described himself during this period as a complete twat and knobhead, indicating a pattern of disruptive and reckless behaviour that has included substance abuse and associating with risky peers. His struggles with drug and alcohol addiction, which we'll come to in greater detail later, began in his early teens and worsened after his role in Star Trek Nemesis in 2002. This fueled his troubled behaviour. Might this be indicative of a lack of accountability to utilise drugs and alcohol in such a way, or is this just an underlying addiction which is separate to who he might be? His criminal activities were relatively minor and did not lead to a sustained criminal lifestyle. Is this as a consequence of the fact that it was simply growing pains, the rebellious behaviour that some children engage in? Or might it have been that if he's a narcissist, that his narcissism recognised that there was a more effective way of behaving, and therefore such rule-breaking and delinquent behaviour became reduced? His behaviour at school was consistently problematic. As I just explained earlier, he was expelled from Reed School, demonstrating that he could not adhere to the school's rules. He later attended Richmond Drama School to pursue acting, but he was expelled again for unspecified behavioural issues. He enrolled at the Drama Centre, London, a prestigious acting school with alumni like Michael Fassbender and Colin Firth. However, he then again left, this time doing so before he completed his studies, to work on the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers. Whilst his departure this time wasn't as a consequence of misconduct, it aligns with the pattern of not completing formal education as a consequence of being distracted by behavioural issues and professional opportunities. His school experiences clearly indicated difficulty conforming to structured environments, which could be exacerbated by his personality and/or early substance abuse issues. There's little evidence to suggest that Hardy achieved significant academic accolades during his childhood or teenage years. His educational journey was disrupted, as mentioned, and his focus was on acting rather than traditional academics. He clearly didn't see academic success as a priority. Age 20, Hardy won a televised modelling competition on The Big Breakfast in 1998, which led to a brief contract with Models 1. His lack of traditional academic achievements has later become overshadowed by his eventual success in acting, and therefore it may well be the case that his academic struggles haven't prevented him from achieving success at all, but it could have turned out differently. His home environment was one where he was raised in a middle-class household in East Sheen, a suburban area of London, which, by all accounts, made for a relatively comfortable and stable environment. He was born to middle-class parents. His father, Edward Chips Hardy, was a writer, and his mother, Anne, was an artist. We'll be examining more about his relationship with them in a separate part. This creative household likely influenced Hardy's early interest in the arts, particularly acting and later writing. Hardy is an only child, and therefore that means it's likely that he will receive significant attention from his parents. It could be the case that, other than being abused or neglected, as can often be the case for certain children, it worked in the other direction for Hardy, where he was perhaps placed on a pedestal, that he received too much attention, was given his own way, which might have created a lack of control environment. As mentioned, Hardy has described feeling not comfortable in his own skin, suggesting that he was experiencing some form of internal struggle, despite a supposedly supportive home environment. He stated that he has expressed a desire to provide his own children with a better childhood than he experienced. Is this somebody who is able to recognise the poor behaviour of his own part and look to make improvements? Or again, is this just a manipulative response issued by somebody who wants to make themselves look good? It might also be the case that we have to consider whether the suggestion of criminal activity and behaviour and these sort of rebellious behaviours that he engaged in are entirely accurate. After all, do not lose sight of the fact that Tom Hardy is an actor, and he plays on the rebellious, hard man, but attractive individual, the bad boy look. You only have to look at his many roles to see that he's fallen in with that portrayal. And it might be that he's forged an early narrative, which is a revision of history, to cultivate this image of being a rebellious individual, to sit alongside the persona that he now adopts with regard to his acting. And this might be some revising of history and interesting facade management to create that particular impression. Alternatively, it could well be true, and notwithstanding the fact that he had an apparently supportive home environment, that he still engaged in rebellious behaviour, non-conformity and law-breaking, which raises a question as to what was driving that behaviour. Was it simply acting out, which as he's grown older and wiser, he's left behind? Was it influenced by his consumption of alcohol and drugs, and once he dealt with that, the driver for those poor behaviours vanished? Or was it something else? Well, we shall be considering that, along with many other aspects of Tom Hardy's life, as we continue the examination by looking at what his relationship with his mother and father was like, both during childhood and adulthood, in part 3. Join me there.